there was a lot of hope and optimism. And okay, it was delusional, but often hope is delusional.
Mm-hmm.
Because especially when you're young, because what do you have when you're young except for your imagination? You don't have experience.
Mm-hmm.
So you imagine that the world can be a certain kind of way because you haven't experienced it yet. You haven't seen what the limits are. The young people with their imaginations who haven't experienced the world and so don't understand necessarily the trade-offs that are required and the restrictions and the limits that exist realistically, geopolitically, economically, and in every other kind of way. The realistic limits that exist on a nation, on a country, on a government, on what they can and cannot do. And we see this very much with regards to the hostility and the condemnation and the criticism of the Muslim governments right now with regards to Gaza. That it tends to be younger people, it tends to be Westerners who have no experience, generally speaking, who don't have experience in politics. But they feel very strongly about the Palestinian issue, obviously, and with good reason, and rightly so. But and I've talked about this before, their zeal and the fervor of their emotion is not matched by their education in the issues, and not just in the Palestinian issue, but in the regional geopolitics. And as I said, the realities of what those governments, the context within which those governments have to operate.
Yeah, which is driven by economy.
Which is driven by economics, and it's driven by the history of colonialism.
Yeah.
I mean, like there was someone who commented in the discussion group the other day about the miserable situation in Egypt, and was blaming the government for that, or rather was explaining public hostility towards the government on the basis of the miserable situation in Egypt. Well, that situation has a context.
Yeah.
It has a history, and you have to understand what that history is and what that context is and why things are the way they are. If you want to make a fair assessment of your government, then you have to understand the context in which they are forced to operate, and that they have limited options, and they have to pursue the options that they actually have.
Yeah, pursue the options that they actually have, with a long-term goal of asserting their own interests.
Mm-hmm.
Which is obviously, to establish your own sovereignty, you would have that.
Nobody wants to be a slave.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of, we were talking also earlier about during the Crusades, how during the Crusades you had many Muslim leaders who collaborated with the Crusaders, with the Christians, who worked with them, who fought alongside them against Muslims,
common enemies.
And so but here's the thing. They were making choices tactically, strategically, according to the options that they had. But the leaders, even during the Crusades, even when they were collaborating with the Crusaders, they always had it in the back of their mind. We want to drive these people out when we can. And we're trying to slowly but surely build conditions that will enable us to drive them out. And sometimes that requires us, in order for us to build that, sometimes that requires us to work with them.
Yeah, and strategize.
And that's and in my opinion, an example of that is like Saudi Arabia working with BlackRock. This is an example, because by doing that, you're building your strength, you're fortifying your strength, you're fortifying your economic and political power in the region, which is slowly but surely enabling you to defy the United States.
Again, we have this, where is Salahuddin, as if, he had this.
Do you know that? Yeah, I know that. Do you know that Salahuddin killed more Muslims than he did kuffar?
That's something. This is the thing. If you
and you know for sure that there were people like, people like Sami Hamdi, people like Daniel Haqiqatjou, people like all of these types, complete political novices, criticizing Salahuddin, and calling Salahuddin at that time a munafiq, calling Salahuddin an Adu Islam, that he was an enemy of Islam, he's an enemy of the Muslims because look, he's not. Look, the Crusaders are over here in Jerusalem, and he's fighting the Fatimids.
Right.
Why? Why is he fighting the Muslims? Why isn't he fighting the kuffar? Well, he has a plan.
Mm-hmm. Takes a lot of work to
He has a plan. And that's what you need to understand about the rulers then and the rulers now. They're pursuing a plan. And again, I'll repeat what I've said many, many times that no one seems to hear. I don't necessarily believe that they're doing it fi sabilillah. I don't necessarily believe that they're doing it for Islam. But nobody wants to be a slave. Mm-hmm. Especially when your name is Crown Prince, when your title is King. It's kind of embarrassing to also be a slave. So you want to be able to control your own territory. You want to have some prestige. You want to have some izzah. Mm-hmm. And I think that like someone like Mohammed bin Salman is more or less more inclined towards Arab nationalism and Saudi pride as a Saudi. And so people have asked like about someone asked a question. I don't remember if it was in the group or in YouTube comments. Like, how can we be sure that the leaders genuinely care about Palestine and the Palestinians? Why do you have to? Mm-hmm. Why do you have to? The Palestinian issue is a legacy building issue for any Arab leader. This is a legacy building issue. So if you can be the ruler who resolves the Palestinian issue once and for all, mm-hmm. you will go down in the history books like Salah ad-Din. And who doesn't want that? Having this very simplistic, simple sort of crayon cartoon version of our own history and how problems can be resolved is in and of itself defeatist and is in and of itself a kind of infantilization of our own approach to the world, that we are infantilizing ourselves and we are, because we feel weak. So we recede into an infantilized mindset because of our perceived weakness, mm-hmm. our perceived weakness mm-hmm. of ourselves. And that's because we have been completely convinced by the Western narrative. Exactly. We've been completely convinced that that all of our rulers are puppets, that all of our rulers are hypocrites, that we have no power, that America can't be challenged, and so on. And so we have a superhero idea of that a superhero has to come in and save the Ummah. Mm-hmm.